Hello, it's Alex, the Bookubus. Today I'm going to be talking about everything I read in May. I read 6 books. 3 of them were buddy reads with friends, and 3 of them were books I was sent for review by the authors. So I'll split the video into 3 and 3, and I'm going to start off with my favourite book of the month, which was my first 5-star read of the year. I know, we're already almost halfway through the year. I've had a couple of 4.5-star reads, but this was my first 5-star. This is Occultation and Other Stories by Laird, Barron. And he's an author that I've heard a lot about and have been meaning to read for ages, but for whatever reason haven't. And my friend Erin very kindly sent me this copy a while ago, and I'm so glad I finally picked it up. And I read this with my friend Emily, and we both absolutely loved it. And this is, a short story collection. They were all so strong. Like, I really love his writing style. It might not be for everyone, but I really dug it. There's really strong imagery and atmosphere, just a generally unsettling tone throughout. Interesting and really unique characters and scenarios. Yeah, a lot of the stuff in here does touch on cosmic horror, but we both felt that it was still in a really unique and refreshing way. There's also some, as you might guess, occult horror, a bit of folk horror, and just general dark stuff happening. And it was absolutely my cup of tea. So the first story in the collection, The Forest, ended up being not my favourite of the collection, but it definitely sets it off on a tone, so you know what you're going to get from the collection, I think. Like I said, really strong imagery and tone, and just felt really different and unique with the story concept. And I did have 3 standout favourites, which were just in the order that they appear in the book. The Lagerstätte, Mysterium Tremendum, which is an amazing title, and The Broadsword. And oh my god, I'm still getting chills just thinking about these stories. They were so good. And there were a couple of moments in, I think, 2 of the stories that genuinely freaked me out, and Emily as well. We were talking about this back and forth, and just so good. It's not that often, I think, for us voracious horror readers, it's not often that we'll actually get scared or creeped out or anything, but this managed it a couple of times for me, so that was pretty amazing. And they're short stories, so I can't really say too much about plot, but I just thought this was such a strong collection. I'm mad I haven't picked up Laird Barron sooner. If you've read any of his work and you have any other books of his that you would recommend I go to next, then please let me know, because I'd love to read more of his work. So this was a 5-star read for me. My second favourite read of the month was Volume 2 of Speaks the Nightbird by Robert McCammon. This book was originally published in 1 big volume, and then at some point was also published in volumes 1 and 2. So those are just the editions that I happen to have, and that's why I read it that way. And I read this with the lovely Kelsey from Slime & Slashers. We had read volume 1 a couple of months ago and both thoroughly enjoyed it. And we didn't want to wait too long before diving into volume 2. We didn't want to be forgetting what had happened and who characters were and such like. So I'm glad we picked it up sooner rather than later. And this is a historical fiction / mystery, I would say. It's not really a horror novel. It does have some kind of maybe horror or horror adjacent elements, but more historical fiction. And it's set in 1699 in the Carolinas, and we're following a magistrate and his clerk who travel to this small community where a woman is being imprisoned, being accused of being a witch. And we are mostly following the clerk, Matthew, who is trying to get justice for this woman. And yeah, this is a slow burn, but it's just filled with wonderful writing. I loved the setting and the historical atmosphere. Like, historical fiction isn't a go-to for me, so I didn't know how I would get on with this, but I really, really liked it. And yeah, a really interesting cast of characters. And yeah, I just thoroughly enjoyed being in this world for, yeah, these 2 books. It was just such a good time. Yeah, it had me really immersed in the story with these characters. And yeah, it's emotional and gripping. It was a wonderful time. I would highly recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. I ended up rating this 4.5 stars, and I did go back and up my 4-star rating of the first volume to 4.5 stars as well. I had a feeling that I was going to be upping it once I'd read volume 2 as well, but I figured I would, you know, err on the side of caution and give it a 4-star at that point. Yeah, this one was so good. Kelsey and I had such a good time with it. So yay, 4.5 stars. And then the other buddy read of the month that I did was Flicker by Theodore Roszak, and I read this with the wonderful Ollie at Criminolly, and sadly, this was my dud of the month. I only gave this one 2 stars. I'm sorry, Ollie. So this is about a film student who discovers this kind of little known director from years previously who had an interesting body of work. Most of his films have been lost, and the little bits he has heard about his work from various people and places intrigue him so much that he decides to, yeah, try and find out as much as he can about this guy and his films. And of course, that sets him into finding out all of these dark and strange things that were going on relating to this film director. Sounds amazing. I was so excited for this, and sadly it did not live up to my expectations at all. I thought this was way too long. It is almost 600 pages long. It didn't need to be half that length, I don't think. Before I go any further, I will say Ollie loved this one. I think he gave it 5 stars. So, you know, take my opinion with a grain of salt, I guess. But I know Ollie and I do have a lot of similar taste, so I thought we would both enjoy this one. But it's interesting to see that, yeah, even though we do share some similar tastes, we had differing opinions on this one. So you may or may not want to give it a go based on that. But this one, I think the best way to sum it up for me is that it was less than the sum of its parts. Like, I think the ideas here were brilliant and it had some really awesome moments, but just the way that the story was told did not interest me. I found myself kind of slogging through it reluctantly at times. And yeah, there were some interesting characters here and there, but they were just kind of smaller parts of the story, so they would come and go. And the main characters, unfortunately, I just didn't really connect with in any way. I thought they were pretty bland and I didn't really care about them. So that might have been a factor in my enjoyment. It is very convoluted and it goes off on like a million different tangents, and it's very lengthy in each of these tangents. So yeah, I enjoyed it somewhat to begin with, enough that I was willing to put up with the lengthiness and the tangents. But after a while, I think I just kind of clocked out. I'm not sure exactly when that was, but I was just reading it in order to get through it in case it picked up, which for me it didn't. I think the ending, without spoiling it, yeah, got a bit too ridiculous for me, and there was a reveal of something that I had already guessed quite earlier on, so that wasn't particularly, you know, mind-blowing or anything. I did like a lot of the like film discussion, both about, you know, cinema and also the technical side of film. Like, some of that I thought was great and really interesting, and the history of this film director, and some of his films, again, had some really great moments. But as a book overall, as a reading experience, it was just not for me. So I ended up giving this one 2 stars. Yeah, it's a shame, but it was a dud for me. Okay, and then the next 3 books are ones that I was sent review copies by the authors. They all kind of contacted me individually. The books sounded interesting, so I said yes. And first up was Grey Noise by Marcus Hawke. This was my first time reading anything by this author, and he had contacted me through Instagram. I had posted something about Videodrome, which just so happens to be one of my favourite films, and he said, oh, you know, you might be interested in my novella, and it did sound like my kind of thing, and I'm really glad I said yes to this because I thought it was excellent. So this is about a guy called Evan who is trying to do something with his life, and he starts up his own video rental store as a nostalgic throwback business venture. But things don't quite go to plan. He ended up picking up this free old school analog TV that was sitting on the side of the road. And when he brings it in to the store thinking this is going to be perfect, you know, the perfect addition to the store, this is like the missing piece, he starts to become haunted by the static that keeps coming up on the screen even when he switches it off. And things go from there in a downward spiral kind of trajectory. This was much more introspective and thought-provoking than I thought it would be from the initial part of the book. It really did kind of have some hard-hitting elements to it that, yeah, really did make me think and, you know, have a bit of an existential crisis, you know, which are the best kind of books, really. Yeah, this one had really good psychological horror, and also it does get pretty violent at times, which I thought was really well done. This one, I would say, has more than meets the eye. Like, it definitely gave me more than I was expecting initially. Yeah, really well written, interesting concept, and yeah, a really great execution. I really did enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars, and I would be interested in reading more from this author. I also read The Mindworms by Nicholas Kaufmann. This is book 3 in the Dr. Laura Powell series. Nick has been kind enough to send me all 3 books over the years, and I have thoroughly enjoyed each one, and this one was no exception. So this is following the character Dr. Laura Powell. She is a medical examiner in a town, and there are definitely some weird things that she is having to deal with over the years. And in this one, she is about to perform an autopsy when the body on the table suddenly wakes up. So all of the signs had been that they were most definitely dead, but now they are not. What on earth could be happening? So this one is a really well-paced and engaging story, like the other entries in the series have been. We've got interesting characters that you can really easily get invested in. It does get emotional at times, like towards the end. I might have had a little bit of a cry, but it's also has like a mystery element, you know, this investigative element to the story as Laura is trying to figure out what's going on and potentially save people if they might be in danger for some reason. There's also action scenes and some really great tension. So a lot of elements that work together really well to, yeah, just create a thoroughly enjoyable read. This one does get pretty gruesome as well. There are, yeah, some pretty gnarly scenes here that get some of them violent and then some of them, yeah, body horror situations. So yeah, this was another excellent read and another one that I gave 4 stars. And then last up, I read another short story collection. This was The Dead Spot, Stories of Lost Girls by Angela Sylvaine. And this is, I'll read you the blurb for this one. It's a heart-wrenching collection of 17 stories where lost girls and women live and die, where they laugh, cry, and disappear from view around that final curve. So I thought the concept was my kind of thing. You know, I love reading from the female perspective, and the fact that these stories were a wide variety of, you know, young and old characters and very different situations and story concepts. Yeah, I was very happy to dive into this one. And overall, I thought it was good. I think it was a bit of a mixed bag for me, story-wise. I don't think there were any bad stories in here by any means, but some of the stories were just okay for me. But there were also some really excellent stories here too. So yeah, like I said, it was a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I'm still glad I read it. And yeah, maybe it was just having read Occultation and other stories earlier in the month that's a tough act to follow, short story collection-wise. So my favourites of the collection were Starved, Return of the Wilderness Girls, and Clutching Air. And yeah, with them being short stories, again, I don't want to say too much about them, but it's still a collection I would recommend. I have read Angela Sylvain's novel Frostbite, which I really, really enjoyed and would definitely recommend. But this one I ended up rating 3.5 stars. So that was everything I read in May. Let me know if you read any of these. I would love to hear your thoughts on them. And yeah, let me know what you've been reading recently, if you have any new favourites or any books that you would recommend. Also, if you haven't yet heard about Giallo July, then please go check out my previous video. This is a month-long reading and watching event, Giallo themed, obviously, that is taking place in the month of July. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. I'm already counting down the days till we hit July. And yeah, I hope you will join in if it sounds interesting to you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!